Well, welcome to another edition here of Getting to the Other Side. We're trying to help couples to navigate through the road of recovery. Um, I am Eddie Capparucci, and I'm really happy to have you folks here. We have a really interesting program today. What would we be talking about is the idea of moving beyond treating just the addiction. Because for me, there needs to be more than we just learn how to manage that unwanted sexual behavior. But instead, we want to change the overall character of the individual who had betrayed. And once again, just to let you know, understand that women also are people who betray others, but I'm going to keep it with the pronouns of a man as the betrayer and women as those who've been betrayed, just to make it easy. So why is it that learning to manage your sexual or pornography addiction is not enough when it comes to the changes that are needed in recovery? And I received the answer to that question many years ago. I was working with a client who he had multiple affairs and he'd been in treatment for nearly a year. And during that time, he'd done everything required to become sexually sober and to be faithful. And one day his wife joined us for a session. And I asked if she was feeling more confident that he would remain faithful and that she feels safe. And she leaned forward on the couch toward me and she said the following. She said, "You're asking me if I believe the man sitting next to me has been faithful for the last 12 months. And the only reason I should believe that is because he's telling me it's true," she explained. However, in the past, he's always denied that he'd been cheating. And he even told me I was crazy because I was suspicious at a time. "See, you need to understand this," she continued. She said, "I don't see any other changes in him whatsoever in his behavior toward me and the children. He's still distant and moody. He also seemed to be stuck in his head most of the time. He's not focusing on what we need. His phone is always in his hand. So why should I trust him? The only difference is that you're telling me is that he's saying I'm no longer unfaithful. But to me, that's not enough to believe." To sit there and say I was shocked is an understatement. My eyes were just opened so wide that day because I really heard her concerns. And I realized that perhaps just helping men to manage their sex or porn addiction just wasn't enough in a recovery plan. And it's critical to those who've been betrayed in order to feel safe. Okay, you need to feel safe before a couple can start to reconnect in a new manner, which means emotionally bonding for the first time. But that reconnection process is really going to be made easier when men seek to make several significant changes in key areas that I've been identifying over the years. But there's also another reason why therapy needs to go beyond just the treatment of the disorder. The men who struggle with this addiction, they don't know how to do relationships. And what do I mean by that? Well, they lack the skills to build the proper foundation for a relationship. They build it on physical intimacy instead of emotional intimacy. And along with that, most of them never really witnessed the model that exhibited what makes a healthy relationship. In fact, I just finished a session recently with a new client who telling me the same thing. He did not see that chemistry between his parents to show what it was. It was just like they were living together as roommates. And as I pointed out in this program many times, this addiction is not about sex. It's about the need for emotional intimacy and connection. It's just that most of these men don't realize that's what they're seeking. So in my private practice where I work exclusively with men who are struggling with these addictions, I've identified significant character deficiencies, 10 in all, that I believe plague all these men. And based on my work with this client population, I've estimated that about 80% of the men who struggle with this addiction have at least 6 of these 10 characteristics. that lead to issues when it comes to cultivating and maintaining a relationship. It is a major struggle for them. And I'm also convinced that at the root of the development of all these issues that you're going to see, it's the lack of proper nurturing that take place in those very critical developmental years as a child. See, a vast majority of these guys, they had good parents, but they didn't know, the parents didn't know how to nurture. They didn't teach them how to deal with emotional distress. And without that important guidance, what happened, these individuals are left to determine on their own, how do I cope with emotional pain? And how do I comfort myself? And as children, we don't have all these, vast worldly experiences, and most of our thinking is emotionally based, not cognitively based. So therefore, they come up with this very simple solution to the dilemma of the pain. I'm not going to think about it. And how do they go about doing that? They distract themselves. So therefore, too much television, too much fantasy play, too much food, perhaps. And somewhere along the line, they stumble across sex and they discover this is the most effective of forms of all distraction I could ever find, and one of the greatest forms of stimulation I have ever experienced. And it soon becomes their go-to drug to eliminate emotional pain and distress. And now as adults, they still run away from emotional pain by using destructive behaviors such as pornography. So let's examine the 10 characters flaws that I've said that prevent men from experiencing rewarding and joyful relationships. And what I've identified is, one, avoids emotional pain. They lack curiosity. They struggle to connect. They're inwardly focused. They're selfish. They have limited interest and passions. They have a low emotional IQ. They lack mindfulness. They have unresolved childhood pain points. They're compulsive and they're fearful. Okay. Now, one thing that's not going to be on this chart that you're going to see right now, and Tammy, you can put that up whenever you want, is that they also are more likely to deal with mood disorders such as depression and anxiety. And that's another element that I'm going to be adding to this as we move along. By identifying the weaknesses on this chart that you see now in front of you, a man can begin to create changes that are required to help his partner feel more secure, while also helping himself to learn the real rewards that life has to offer. And as I said before, in my experience, more than 80% of the men that I work with have issues in 6 or more of these growth areas. So let's take a look at these one by one. I'm just going to give you a brief synopsis of each of these right now. And then in our program next month, what I'm going to do is walk through each of these and how do we deal with those? How do we start to make that change? So starting at the top and avoiding emotional pain, and I talked to you a little bit about that just a moment ago, what happens with kids. But at the heart of most addictions, it's unresolved emotional pain that is covered up by addictive behaviors. And this is especially true for those who are dealing with a sex or porn addiction. The inability to sit and deal with emotional stress, it leads these individuals to distract themselves and seek comfort. And as I said before, in most cases, this behavior was adapted at an early age. There are kids who are struggling with this pain and they don't receive the nurturing required to learn how to deal with that discomfort and how to help to self-soothe. No one ever explained to them that it's okay to be upset by hurtful events that occurred. Instead, they're left on their own to try to figure this out. Nobody's there to say, you know what you're feeling is normal. And guess what? What you've been through, maybe I've been through or other people have been through. And they don't get that. That's not being taught to them. So therefore, there's only one solution, as I mentioned before, they need to learn to run away. They have to learn how to distract themselves. And then you fast forward 20 years, and then you have these adults who are still caught up in the same cycle of running away, distracting themselves. And why? Because they don't know what to do to manage emotional pain. The second one is lack of curiosity. Now, you may be wondering, why would becoming more curious be part of a growth chart for men who are struggling with a sex and porn addiction? And the reason is the lack of curiosity results in their inability to go deeper in relationships. In most cases, as children, no one ever challenged them to be curious about people. So today, as adults, they may be curious about various topics or they may have interest, but that curiosity doesn't, it rarely extends to people. You know, seeking knowledge about your partner and continuously trying to understand them better strengthens a relationship. So when, a spouse comes and says, you know what, I feel today, I feel like, everything's so dark. And what you probably get is, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Versus, explain to me, what does dark mean? What does that look like in your world? Those kind of things. Or even if, it's something like, oh, you know what? That was the best time I've ever had. And what made that so special for you? What was unique about it? What was different that it was like what you termed the best? Curiosity is very, very important. It is something that we do not really have. They struggle to connect, emotionally connect. And again, I find in my working with men that as children, they did not have that relationship model where parents demonstrated those essential components in a healthy relationship. They didn't see mom and dad holding hands, arms around each other, maybe even catch them kissing once in a while or dancing in the kitchen without music. None of that stuff was there. And in some instances, there was little in the way of emotional nurturing that was taking place in the home, which therefore left these kids to learn about connecting from TV and friends. And therefore, now imagine if they didn't have any friends. How are they going to learn to connect? Connection in relationships requires a person to be emotionally available. And for these men, that's like a foreign language. And when I say these men, hey, guess what? I'm one of those guys too. Okay, I've been through all this stuff. And I still don't do it all perfectly. All you can do is ask my wife and she'll tell you what that is. But I try. I try to make the effort to do so. If I tell my men, you know what? You don't know, you wouldn't know emotional intimacy if it hit you in the face. But that's not their fault. It's the only know that they know. And therefore they need to learn. It's not good enough just to stay status quo and just say, well, I don't know. No, I'm sorry. You commit to a relationship, you need to continue to be doing the work to strengthen that relationship in whichever way possible. If we continue to move around the chart, we're looking at inwardly focused, being selfish. These men grow up spending way too much time in their own heads, and they continue to do that today. They're running through life with their head down, and they're oblivious to much of what's going on around them, especially the wants, needs, and desires of others. We especially see this playing out when it comes to allowing their emotions to trump other people's emotion. You talk about, maybe how tough your day was, and they'll comment, really, you should have had my day. That was tough. It becomes more about them than it is about you. They find it difficult. They're always going back to what they're experiencing and what they're going through. And this trait is one that's usually developed when young children get this impression that no one seems to care. So therefore, they're just going to go about life, just with a mind full of fantasies and worries. And they're rarely in the moment unless that moment is producing adrenaline. If that moment producing a rush, a stimulation, they're in it. But other than that, their mind is somewhere else, whether it's in the past, in the future, but very rarely are they right here. Limited interest and passion. Now, this one is not one that this doesn't fit in that 80% group here. This is one that maybe a handful of men would have. But it's amazing the individuals I work with that they tell me the same thing. I don't have a lot of interest and I have few, if any, friends. And in a way, this connects back to that lack of curiosity that we were talking about earlier. These men don't challenge themselves to move beyond their comfort zone. They get stuck in routines that become their life. So again, as children, there was nobody there who challenged them, who taught them to explore, be able to expand their levels of interest. Now, they could become very predictable and even boring in some cases, because the fact of the matter is they're not really living, they're simply existing. And that is why they were drawn to things that are so highly stimulated, such as pornography. You know, they're going to be drawn to that because it is something that takes them out of this mundane kind of world that they live in. The low emotional IQ, and again, this one actually strikes about 9 out of 10 men who come in. The number two complaint I receive most from those who've been betrayed is he can't share his emotions. And a large majority of the individuals who deal with a sex and porn addiction have a difficult time emotionally connecting with others because they don't know what they truly feel. They suffer from that low emotional IQ. And what that means is they can tell you if they're angry, they can tell you if they're sad, they can tell you if they're fearful or happy. But beyond that, nothing, you know? And even for those who can identify what it is, they will struggle to express it. And the reason being is they were taught a long time ago, either directly or indirectly, nothing good comes from sharing your emotions. It's gonna bring an array of problems. And finally, they struggle when others attempt to be vulnerable with them. Um, it creates this high level of anxiety. So what they do is they attempt to minimize, ignore, or fix the problem. And this is a major issue that causes a lot of distress in most of these men's relationships. And if you want to find out verification of that, just ask their partner. Lacking mindfulness, you know, understanding that they are experiencing emotions is really foreign for these guys. As I said, I'll go back to those four I talked about before. And getting them to sit still and relax is totally problematic. You know, when I talk to guys sometimes about, hey, you know what we're going to do? We're going to learn how to meditate. We're going to learn how to be still. And you would think that I was asking them, you know, to cut off their ring finger. I mean, it just, like, still, you want me to sit and do nothing? You want, well, will there be a TV on? No, there'll be nothing. And it's just very, very frightening. They must be active. The expectation that they have is, you know, if they're not active, they're going to zone out in front of a TV, video games, internet, sports, whatever it may be, pornography. And it's their lack of mindfulness that prevents them from staying one step ahead of their addiction. With my program, that's one of the things that we really focus on. You need to be mindful of how you're doing mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, that you're not drained. And the thing is, they're not aware, because when you're drained in any of those four areas, again, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, bad things happen because the brain is screaming for stimulation. So a lack of mindfulness also results in a partner feeling she's not the priority and that he doesn't think about her when they're apart. Mindfulness is a major key in not just the helping to learn how to manage the disorder, but also in how to build a very strong relationship. As we continue on here, we're looking at unresolved childhood pain points. Now, this isn't really a character trait, but it's a very important issue that sits at the heart of this addiction. These men are still haunted by past childhood traumas, but you're just not aware of it. Events that happened decades ago are stirred up by various circumstances that happen today. And because many of these pain points are suppressed, men are not aware that they're being triggered. And when it comes to the trauma, again, not all events are major. Some individuals are scarred by 1,000 small cuts that take place over a period of time. You don't have to have the big T. It could be a bunch of real little T's that are going on there. And I'm not going to go too in depth in this topic here. You can really learn a lot more about the childhood traumas and the inner child on the previous seminars that I had done. And we have two more left. One is compulsive. Now, I'm not quite sure I need to even explain why this is a flaw. The inability to stop, assess, and rationally think through decisions before making them is not really high on the list of strengths of these guys. They're reactive, and this type of behavior, comes, and what happens is you wind up making unwise and unhealthy decisions. This is an area of growth that must be addressed, again, not just to help to manage that addictive problem, but to assist in building a satisfying and productive relationship. And why in the relationship? Well, because you know what? Most of your decision won't be about, oh, what's good for me? What do I want? What do I need now? Then you'll stop and say, ooh, what will this action or inaction mean to my spouse? That's an important question, and we never take the time to ask it. And when we do ask that of ourselves, you're going to find out that, you know what, you're not going to be in the doghouse as often, because you're going to be looking outward to understand what is it that's going to make them feel safe, feel secure. And as I said before, know you're thinking about them even though they're not there. And the last one we have is fearful. Once again, if you look at all of the traits that we just talked about, you're going to find that fear is associated with each one. And while it's interesting that most of these men don't think about themselves as fearful, when they start their recovery work, especially the inner child recovery work, all of them come to the conclusion that fear has been a major driver in most of their decision making. When we start to reduce the fear, or at least learn to hold on to it and persevere, we come to find that our rational thinking skills become sharper, and they're more effective in leading us to make better decisions and outcomes. So anyway, that gives you the 10. As I said, there's the 11th that'll be popping up in there about the mood disorders that people suffer, mostly from a depressive nature or anxiety nature. But next time what we're going to do is we're going to look at these, and we're going to say, okay, how do I go about making changes in these areas? So that's all I have for you this week, Tammy.
I told you my cat just decided to jump up here. So we've got some questions, and I stopped the screen share, but I wanted to comment on the number 2 complaint. I hear that all the time from partners. I had a call this morning where somebody was like, he stopped the behavior, but he's emotionally unavailable. Like there's no intimacy and not, not just sexual, and I was going around with you on that, and I was like, exactly. And the other thing I was thinking too with the mindfulness, like, first of all, when you said mindfulness and being still, like, I wanted to squirm right away, because like, it's just really challenging to be able to be present. But I think it was also, as long as I stay ahead, and I know that this is true for other addicts too, as long as I stay ahead of it, then I don't have to deal with it, you know, and even with the emotions, like I think so many people are so good at numbing out and escaping them that even identifying, you know, anger or whatever, you know, can be challenging. But with practice and, you know, getting more information and starting to take, you know, inventory of where am I really at? What is that? You know, it's all stuff that we can learn, you know, it's like muscles that we can build. And I was thinking too, it's very uncomfortable to engage in this initially, but the rewards of connecting with another human being in a meaningful way, you know, with this person that you say you love, you know, and loves you, but if you're always disconnected and putting up that wall, you're missing out. And so it's so worth the effort to learn to get these tools and to build these muscles. So okay, so we've got some questions. A 49-year-old husband of 17 years, how does other issues like mental illness, bipolar, alcoholism impact or cause infidelity that only started after 12 years of marriage?
Oh, well, that's going to be, yeah, they could definitely impact. And the impact, let's just take alcoholism for a moment. There have been men who I've worked with who their acting out only occurred when they were drinking. Because again, all of a sudden now they're not thinking very clearly. Okay, they're being more emotionally driven in their thinking, and you can say the same thing for a mental illness like bipolar. When somebody becomes manic, and if they're not dealing with it on the right medication, they can make many compulsive. You talk about compulsive. I mean, this is compulsive, to the 10th degree. I mean, this is to that point. So therefore, yes, they could definitely impact very severely with really harsh consequences, the infidelity in those relationships.
Yeah. And, when there's mental health stuff going on, I mean, at Seeking Integrity, we look at mental health issues, it really is important to understand everything that's going on, because it's really easy to paint, in broad strokes that, oh, everybody does this, and it isn't. I mean, while there are lots of commonalities, and underlying issues like you've talked about, the neglect, abandonment, abuse, trauma, like all of those things, and you talked about it can be 1,000 little scars, not, one big, massive, whatever. So it really needs to be looked at by competent professionals. So.
Mhm.
Next question. In my case, my guy is highly connective to me emotionally. He's kind, loving, empathetic, understanding, compassionate, and he totally admits and takes responsibility for hurting me with his unfaithfulness. But he's also a salesman by trade, and I wonder if he's just as good at manipulation by flattery, etc. But he is self-focused in other ways, and he even admits that too. How in the world can I actually tell if his resolve to be faithful to me is real? And how do I know if I've hit the bottom yet with disclosure? It's only been 4 months since discovery. Do you find lie detector tests to be successful? Let's break that down. So let's start with, she's wondering, how do I know if he's just being a salesman and using his great techniques on her?
Well, remember, the thing is, what I said was 9 out of 10 men have a low emotional IQ. There is the one who doesn't. And he could be this guy who, again, he's very attentive. He's into your needs and what that's about. That's not the driving factor of why he's unfaithful. Okay. We go back to the inner children. There, you got 8 other reasons to be looking at to go deeper to make a determination. So therefore, there are those guys who they're not doing it just to manipulate or again, to flatter. They really do know how to emotionally connect, but yet there is something else that's running in the background that causes them to disconnect when they're not around you. So if he's on the road or wherever it is, he now all of a sudden, he put you in a compartment over here and you don't exist. And he needs to be able to bring that back so that wherever he is, you're there with him.
So, and she adds, he's self-focused in other ways and even admits to that. Part of what I also read is it's been 4 months. So this, this is very early in the process, and it takes a long time for him to do, consistently the right thing to show that he is trustworthy. And it takes a long time to change and and build those muscles of, doing things differently. If it's always, I've done things this way and I've got to turn and do it this way, it's challenging not to return to the other thing. But what are your thoughts on the other ways he's self-focused?
Yeah, I mean, but we go back to the idea of her hitting, bottom. I'm not sure if she's hit bottom yet. May not, because like to your point, it is far, far too early with that. Um, but you also bring up the sense about the lie detector. Are they successful? We use them when we do disclosures. It is followed up by a polygraph and just ensure, do we have everything? And some people, they put them in place. You know what? We want to do this over the next year, like 2 or 3 more times. It all depends on, again, the severity of what the situation is. But usually whenever we do a disclosure, it is followed up with that lie detector test just to, again, validate the fact that, yes, what he has put out there is completely the truth. Because for you to hit bottom, you need to feel that, you know what, I really feel in my heart, I now know everything. If you feel there, it's like, okay, we're at ground zero. We can't go any, I can't fall any further with something else coming at me. So, and that can help you to begin, again, the step to climb out of that hole that he's put you in.
Yeah, and different therapists use lie detectors in different ways. Some do it at the beginning, some do it at the end. So, I want to key in on the disclosure process. We talk about this a lot on the various webinars because it's such a huge topic, and having a therapeutic disclosure, that means you're both prepared and supported, that there's a process, there's a plan, but that you're clear that, okay, this particular therapist, wants to do the polygraph on the information beforehand so that, going into the disclosure, that it's, as truthful as possible or whatever. I mean, so understanding the process and the plan, ends up providing the best results. Dr. Rob talks about, and did again on last Monday's webinar, so feel free to watch that one. But he talked about that, and the point of a disclosure is to have a foundation on which to build. So it's kind of leveling the playing field so that everybody's in this place, because otherwise it's, I'm holding secrets and I don't know. And, so if you get, this foundation on which to build, so there isn't a process, there's, like I said, some people use lie detectors in various different ways, some don't. It really is, as long as you guys understand the process that you're going into and both, agree that that's good, for the two of you. If at the end of the day, you're looking to repair the relationship and move forward, then, doing these certain things. And the person who's the betrayer is the low man on the totem pole, so to speak, so it needs to be accountable, needs to be responsible, needs to show up and do the things that are going to make you feel safe. But, I know you had discovery, and I always hate that, I mean, that's how it typically happens, but disclosure done well by the right therapists with the right support can be, part of the healing process. So the next person says, is this going to be recorded? Yes, these are recorded. So your questions are asked and answered in a general way. And this will be posted probably later today, but for sure will be up tomorrow. And the ones that Eddie referred to, I mean, he did a great series on that, going deeper, his book about the inner children, and, and he's done, like, I always look forward to my time with Eddie monthly, but please, you will find them. So on sexandrelationshiphealing.com under resources, you'll be able to see any previously recorded webinars, and that is true of Eddie's. Troy Love did. I mean, Mark Anthony Lore, John Taylor, Dr. Rob, Dr. David, Kristen Snowden, all of those, Kim Buck, Matt Wheeler. You can see we have a lot of them, and I'm probably forgetting somebody, but anyway, so please take a look at, hundreds and hundreds of hours of content. I will ask this question. So, what actually causes a man to change? There's a big question, Eddie.
Yeah, but there's a really short and direct answer. One, you have to have the desire to change. And two, you have to make the commitment to do the work. I mean, I could end it there, but I'm not. But that's what is needed. He needs to realize and say, you know what? The man I am is not the man I want to be. I need to relook at what my legacy is going to be. And I need to learn to shift it and change it, because I want to be someone that people look at and say, wow, what integrity. What a commitment this guy has toward other people. And until that's done first, he has very little chance of changing. And once he says, yes, I do want to change, and because I've had men who said, oh no, yeah, definitely want to change. I want to be that new guy. And then they don't put in the work, and you got to ask them every week. And like, well, did you do your reading? Well, not all of it, only got half. And well, did you write it? No, I really didn't get a chance. And after a while, and I give people a few time, but after a while, I do what people refer to, punch them in the face and say, obviously you don't want to be here. Because if you did, you would be going above and beyond. And that's where you can tell. You tell the guy who's really passionate about recovery, because it's not just, again, he's looking to get rid of this unwanted behavior. He wants to change who he is in his heart. So those are the two things you need. You need the desire and you need the commitment.
And I think for the guys that are, going to an outpatient program, that is really true. We do get at Seeking Integrity the guys that are only there because their back is up against the wall, their partner or spouse is going, I'm out of here unless. And so they don't really come in with the desire to change. They come in with the desire to not have things like I'm going to do this so that so that she won't, whatever negative consequence. And it usually takes a few days before they start figuring out that they do need to change. They do want to change. So, because I've had people call that said, well, I know he's got to want to change. And I was like, well, we'll take them in that pre-state, just because, we get so much information that, that we start stacking up and going, look. The other thing I say to people, because I remember going off to treatment and I was terrified. I was terrified that it wouldn't work for me. And I was probably equally as terrified that it would, because I could not imagine living without all my maladaptive coping mechanisms. So it's a terrifying step to take. It's so worth it, like we were talking about a little bit ago too. It's like to be able to in a healthy way connect with people, to have integrity, to be able to be my true self and not have to have this facade, of, well, this is what I present to everybody else, but I know that, how broken I am, but I can't let people see that, so it's terrifying, but it's worth it. Next question, female recovering addict. Welcome. I can totally relate to this, as I have heard the traits I thought of masculine figures like my stepfather who raised me. He is a sex addict. He was always absent, even being physically in the same room. And I can see the pattern in my relationships with men. I seem to have this pattern of choosing very absent men, quiet, TV, workaholics, and other types of addicts, and into a mirror effect. I specifically relate to not having a healthy, nurturing examples in my life.
Yeah, this, once again, you look at this and you say, all right, what these men that you're attracting, they're very safe men in a way, because you don't have to emotionally bond with these folks. You know, they're distant, they're quiet, they're sitting in front of TV, they're not there because they're workaholics or whatever. So therefore, you don't need to worry about bonding and attaching, even though it's the desire that you want. So again, and part of that is the fear of, ooh, if I attach with someone, is this going to lead to pain? Because again, you know, you go back to an attachment theory, and in some cases, the closer I allow somebody into my world, the more power I give them over me, because now I'm vulnerable. Or the closer I allow them to be, the ugliness they will see within me, and they will then reject me. So I think that's part of the pattern. And for you, it becomes the idea, okay, I need to do the work to be able to step outside this negative comfort zone of these men so I can learn to be with somebody. But first you have to learn how to connect yourself. And then I can go and I can seek somebody who we can do that in a very healthy way.
And I was thinking, you know, like, yes, you can be hurt, but if you have a support network around you, they're going to be able to help hold you, you know, together. And I've, you know, I've been burned by people, you know, many times, but I've always been, you know, that better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. That always comes to mind. I'm willing to put myself out there because the joy of connecting to people and being, you know, when relationships are good, I mean, that's what really matters. You know, I miss in this coronavirus time, you know, going to the gym and seeing my friends there. I mean, I miss all of those connections, you know, and Zoom is nice and all of that kind of stuff, but it's different. And I thought how good for me that as a person in recovery, I care about those relationships, because it'd be real easy to just, you know, go to the isolation side. So, okay, next question, Eddie, is these all describe my 60-year-old husband square on. I also described him mentally living in me-ism world, not we-ism, and can be abusive. I will add his clinically diagnosed personality disorders with antisocial personality disorder, avoidant disorder, and narcissistic traits. After 4 years from D-Day and formal disclosure already done, some extensive therapy for both of us individually, and now starting on some marital therapy the last few weeks, I am at my wit's end with his inability to get out of his own way and find empathy and not get so self-centered and poor him. My question is this: with this hardwired personality disorders, along with the points you perfectly described in my husband of 40 years, what kind of therapy and various treatments would break through these difficult issues to build trust? Or does the personality disorder become obstacles with recovery and building trust? He fights back when challenged, and to be held accountable by me, he refuses any more intensives. I think he manipulates his non-CSAT therapist.
Yeah, challenging is a light word for this. When you get into personality disorder, see, an avoidant personality disorder, that you can deal with that. You can work through that. Even, you know, a narcissist, even though there's data out there that says no, narcissists don't really change. You know what? Narcissists can make adjustments. How do I know that? I was a narcissist. Okay, we can be adjusted. The antisocial, that that's hard. I mean, because that's somebody who grew up, I mean, just doesn't care. It is about me. It's all about me. Um, that doesn't mean, again, that we give up in trying. I think from a cognitive approach in, you know, therapy, or even maybe a narrative approach where therefore what you're trying to do is get him to outline, okay, what's your story? What happened to you? What goes on with you? Why are you this way? And then be able to help him maybe say, would you like to rewrite your story? The problem is he may not want to rewrite the story at all. That's what it becomes down to. For you, and again, I give this advice because, and I give it with a grain of salt because I don't know all the details. you need to learn how to live life on your own and for yourself, and not be looking at him as this chain dragging you behind. And I'm not saying you need to divorce. I'm not saying any of that. But you need to go and find, how do I continue to live? Because obviously his interest is not me. He doesn't really care about how I do it. So therefore we move along our own pathway. And what we do in prayer and hope that maybe at some point he comes and walks beside you as he sees you heading off that way. So, I mean, and there's a really good book, Thriving in Difficult Marriages. And you may want to check that out and take a look at it. Sorry, I don't have a better answer for you. This is, but like I said, when we get into those kind of, personality disorder, we are really rather limited. It really takes the individual to be the one, it goes back to the question we had before, who wants to say, hey, I need to make a change and I want to be different, despite the fact that it's going to be hard for me.
Yeah, I was actually thinking the same thing, particularly when I won't do this and I won't do that, if he's unwilling, then, part of the serenity prayer is, what can I change? And all I can change is me and my reactions and actions. So I'm thinking I would build a really solid friend support system. I would have activities, and like my life would be full. And, my connections, my need for connection with him would be on the level that he's willing and able to give. Because, you're saying, he goes to a therapist that is not really helping a whole lot, and he's unwilling to do anything else. So, you've got a lot of data. Dr. Rob talks about this too. You've got data. So if you take the emotions out, if you're just looking at the picture of here's what's happening, what does that look like? So, what you can do is have support, friends, connections outside of that.
Because if it focuses on trying to pull him in with you, you know what? You may well just get up, go stand next to the wall, and keep banging your head against it, but you're going to get the same results. It's going to be a headache. It's just not going to be the way to go. He needs to make the decision to move. You can't move him, but you can move yourself. And that's what Tammy's talking about.
Yeah. And if you haven't already joined the Old Lady Posse group, it's for people who have been in longer term relationships that are really, may or may not be looking to, to leave the relationship, but, are dealing with, or have been dealing with challenging situations. So consider that. Okay. How should I address my husband when he is self-absorbed and inattentive with anything I need from him, whether it's spiritual, emotional, physical, or just chores around the house, without getting defensive? Also, how can I encourage my husband to initiate any of those above issues without my prompting? I wait patiently and he still does not initiate. He started therapy 2 weeks ago, so I have hope. That's really early. Last question: can you vape and truly be in recovery? Oh, let's start with the above, and then we'll get to. So it's only been 2 weeks, but what are your thoughts on getting him?
Give him time, patience. With you right now, it's about patience. I think, if you haven't been in to see his therapist, I think you need to be in there just to say, this is what I see. This is what concerns me. So that therapists have an idea of what some of the issues are. This is a guy who, again, he's in his own head. He's lost and absorbed, and he needs to get into a state of being mindful, that he, realized that, oh, guess what? The world doesn't evolve around me. There are other people who have needs and desires and wants also, and I need to be able to step out of that in order to do it. But the fact that he started therapy 2 weeks ago is huge. That's great news. Like I said, I would try to get into see his therapist, whether with him or without him, but let him know that what you'd like to do. But right now you just need to be patient and see if the process plays itself out.
And so if you haven't read Out of the Doghouse, both of you, highly recommend that. And yeah, I would be, I learned this from my non-addictive husband. He was like, if you need me to do something, ask. And so what I learned also was, because women are good at like seeing what needs to be done and expecting everybody. This was with children too. So I've learned that, like we can have a list, and it can be, well, on Monday, I need you to take out the trash. On Tuesday, whatever. And you can put it in your calendar so you get a calendar reminder. I mean, him. And so I think it's having a discussion of, let's lay this out in an organized fashion so that, it can be a successful thing and not be an area where we have to have conflict. Be proactive about it. And I still do this, and my husband's within earshot, but like if he unloads the dishwasher, I say thank you. I never expect him to say thank you when I unload the dishwasher or anything else, but it costs me almost nothing, and I'm grateful. So that's just a thing. I'm going to talk about the vaping.
Well,
We
I have one more comment about
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
The idea that, what you just said, they were great, but you know what? You may put together that list and he still may not adhere to that. And I think to Tammy's point, what's more important, that he does it or that he does it proactively? So therefore, if he's even not being proactive, for you to say, hey, can you please take out the garbage? And even though you have to remind him, the fact that he does it, great. And then to Tammy's point, praise, praise, praise. It's conditioning. You're conditioning. The more he hears the praise, hopefully the more he winds up wanting to do it. Vaping.
About vaping, yes. So Seeking Integrity is a smoke-free, vape-free facility, and here's why. Dr. David, I'm going to invite you to go to Dr. David Fawcett's webinar tonight at 5 p.m. Pacific time, and he talks about what nicotine does to the brain and how it's constantly hijacking and leaving you in that altered state. So if you really want to get recovery, lose the cigarettes, lose the vaping. It's like you are constantly inflicting your brain with the stuff that's going to keep it, kind of engaged and not really get into recovery. So there will be other people that disagree. Go talk to Dr. David.
But let us take a step back with that too, because I do agree 100% what he's saying. However, for some people, when you're asking them to move away from two things, because he's trying to move away from his pornography and all of this, okay, which was one soothing mechanism, and then he has this one, and now we have none, that could be very problematic. So maybe what we try to do is tackle the one, and then we go after and we tackle the other. But you're right, that is not conducive for what we're trying to do. However, if you try to pull both out at the same time, he may throw everything away. And just say,
and I agree, but we also help, our clients like that come in because we are a smoke-free, vape-free. So if they need a smoking cessation program, and some of those help, but he's always, it's like the people who stop drinking, but they're still using cannabis, or they're still using porn. So yes, you kind of pick and choose, but if you're always kind of, it's the pressure cooker. And if you're always kind of keeping the lid on, but you're not really addressing the underlying issues, because all the stuff that Eddie was talking about, that's the underlying issue stuff. So
that's why you use it porn, that way it's all there. And that's why you take care of that, you draw down, then everything goes away.
So 2 years in, my SA husband is sober. He has been regular in his individual therapy, listens to Forest Men's Group, and within the last month, so Forest Group, for those that he has a Sunday night drop-in group for men. We have a number of those. Within the last month, once weekly to 12-step, the only 12-step, because it was my boundary, and feels that this is all he needs to be considered a successfully recovery. No sponsor, and digs his heels in when I tell him I need him to have one. He has had 2 slips in the last year and no follow-up with anyone. And I only became aware because I asked, do I throw in the towel?
Do I throw in the towel? All right, well, he's sober, okay? He's in his individual therapy. He's with this group. He goes to 12 step, but that's because you're twisting his arm to do so. I think the question to really sit down and with him is to, again, not point the finger, but to, again, if you even walk through some of the stuff that we did today, but to ask him, one, how does he feel about himself when it comes to his recovery? How how is he, does he feel that he is helping you, okay, and your struggle? And if he can't really answer that question very well, then I think you need to get into therapist with him to say, look, I am really, there's things here that just are worrying. They're worrying to me. Because one of the things he should be really focused on is helping to lower your anxiety, to make you feel safer. And if that's not happening, well, then you know what? There's always going to be a kind of conflict that is going on in the relationship. So I think what I'm looking for is to sit down with him and again, in a very loving, kind way, just to say, these are the struggles I'm having and I need your help. Can you please help me? And talk to me about why you struggle to do some of the stuff that would bring my anxiety down.
Yeah, and I liked your idea about, going to see his therapist too, because I think it's fair to say, here's what I'm seeing. You in your presentation said, ask my wife, and that comes up regularly because, a therapist is only seeing one side of it and hearing, from this person, oh, I'm doing everything right, I'm doing whatever, well, the partner can go, yeah, but I'm not feeling safety, I'm not feeling, all of these things. I mentioned Out of the Doghouse earlier. That would be another good one too. So, am I allowed to require my sex porn addict husband to see a qualified therapist? His current LMFT, his current is LMFT, but is not strongly directing him in directions that CSATs would, such as a sponsor or even how to direct a therapeutic disclosure. In a couple session, oh, he told him to Google what a disclosure should look like.
That's great. All right. So first and foremost, one, you're not required to do anything, and you can't. However, I would strongly encourage him that he needs to be dealing with a therapist who fully understands what is a sex and pornography addiction. And you may or may not be getting that from a marriage, family therapist.
They're not trained for it.
I'm not trashing them, but right, most of them
Right.
are not trained.
Exactly. It's just training. So,
Yeah. So therefore, no. It's like I have a toothache, and I'm gonna go to an orthodontist, not an orthodontist, an orthopedist. All
yeah.
right, it doesn't work. He needs to be there, and no, he should not be sitting there and disclosure and googling what a disclosure looks like. Somebody should be walking him through that process because there are 100 different things out there on Google about disclosure, and 99% of them 99 are wrong. So yes, and if you want to find somebody, you can go to. Do you have a directory on your site?
Well, just because they have training doesn't make them necessarily great therapists either. So lots of people do email me and ask, for recommendations, and I'm fine with that. But there are disclosure podcasts on our sexandrelationshiphealing.com site. So you can listen to more about disclosure. Dr. Rob, it gets asked that question every week on his webinar. So like there's so many places to get good information about what it is. But yeah, I mean, if you want the right help, you go to like Eddie said, you go to the person who can help you, not fumble around. It just gets worse. It's like one of those things it's just making it worse. I hear all the time, this therapist just made things worse. So there is good help.
You still have more questions.
We have more questions, but we're out of time. So I'm going to ask, I think, or do you have like 5 more minutes?
I got 5 more minutes.
Okay. All right. My husband and I have been married 29 years. Because of my insistence, we have been to many counselors over the years. My husband is a porn addict. I also wonder if there is more going on. He has a business that employs older teens. Over the years, he has pursued or flirted with several of the teen girls. Our counselors are mostly overlooked this, but I can't. He's going to get into big trouble. Our present counselor does not think that a sexual addiction is present, nor does my husband. We are in a rural area and we have not access to sex addiction therapists. They work online too. We have been seeing an LMFT for a year and progress seems to be very slow because we are making no progress in couples therapy. Our therapist is working with us separately. I feel like I am making progress, but I do not trust what I see in my husband. His progression and growth seems extremely slow. Would a different approach be more effective? Telling our story to another counselor is daunting.
First and foremost, one, I would not be in couples therapy right now.
Right.
He's not in a position to be doing that. He needs
No.
to be doing his own work. And yes, he does need to find someone who's certified in it. As Tammy mentioned, there are those who work online, especially in the circumstance that we're going through right now. More and more of them are doing that. You can go to psychologytoday.com, you'll find people there, or even go to CSAT website and you'll find
Email me, tell me where you're located and I'll help you out. But yeah.
there are places to go to find these people. But again, he has to make that commitment to it. The teenage girls kind of,
He could lose his business. He could have, I hear this, we get the calls from the people who have gotten in legal trouble because, all you need is one of these girls to, to say he was inappropriate.
Overlooking that and not, that's a big red flag. If he has that business, there should be somebody else who are dealing with those girls. That should be like off limit for him along there.
There is help, there is hope, but there is high risk with what's going on. So, okay, I'm the addict and my betrayed is not in contact with her therapist. I have been ready to have a therapeutic disclosure for 5 to 6 months. We have been separated since July of 19, and I have been in recovery since D-Day, August of 18. My therapist is really concerned for us, and especially my wife, since she won't get support in helping her in recovery. I know that I cannot do this alone. What can help her progress in her healing?
Well, I wish she was on this call with us.
Yeah.
So make it a little bit easier for us in that way. First and foremost, I'm glad that you have your disclosure ready. That's good. But again, she has to be the one who drives and says, I want to do that. I'll say this. It reaches a point that, again, now July, you're almost a year that you guys have been separated, okay? Got to reach a point where you need to be honest and say to her, look, what are we doing here? Is there a future? Or is there not a future? If you feel there's not, and if you get, I don't know, then it has to be, okay, well then, here are my boundaries. Because at some point you get to have boundaries too, especially if you've been doing your work and it looks like you've been doing it for quite some time, then you now have boundaries. Say, all right, you know what I need? I need you to be doing your work and I need an answer in a certain time frame. That's where I would be. I don't know, Tammy, if you think somewhat different.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree, and her getting support is on her, and there's great support. The other thing is, Dr. Rob, we talk about this on our Monday night webinar all the time too. It's like, we don't recommend doing a disclosure if the point of it is to have a foundation on which to build. So if she's out of there, if Eddie's right, it's been almost a year, and if there is not a plan for restoring the relationship and moving forward, then we don't recommend doing a disclosure. That's kind of where it's at. So I love your idea. You get to hold the boundaries too, but yeah, having what are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
So okay, you got through the questions. Thank you, everyone. This will be posted. Somebody asked about this. This will be posted on the sexandrelationshiphealing.com website. Eddie will be back the third Wednesday of the month in June already. And as mentioned, he's going to be a guest on intherooms.com for the Super Saturday Recovery Summit on June 20th. So stay tuned for that. We'll post information. So thank you all for joining. Thanks for the great questions. Thank you, Eddie, as always. Grateful.
Bye.
Bye.